Hey friends, in today's video we're going to look at how to wind yarn when you don't have the option of having it wound for you. So if you're stuck in isolation like I am and you have this skein that you really want to use, know that you can do it at home on your own. So the first thing you're going to need is your yarn, possibly a pair of scissors, and either your knees or a chair. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. We're going to start with the chair, and then I'll show you if you just want to use your own knees. You can also, if you're in isolation with someone else, have them use their hands. Okay, here we go. All right, so the first thing you want to do when you're getting ready to wind your yarn by hand is to unhang it. So I'm going to take off my tags. This is Koigu KPPM. It was a color collector's edition. It was garden. So beautiful. I'm going to open it up and make sure that all of the strands are going in the same direction. So this might take a little time, but you want to go through and just make sure before you cut any ties that all of the strands are going in the same direction. So if you have something where they look like maybe they're crisscrossed, see if you can figure out how to move them around so that they go in the same direction. That's super important. Not as important if you're doing it by hand, but if you're going to be doing this with a ball winder at home, that's vital. So once you have all your strands going in the right direction, you can either use the back of a chair or your knees. So if you're going to use the back of a chair, you will just place this over the chair. I tend to like my knees because I find that when I put it over a chair, it can get caught on bolts or screws or just parts. So what I do is I'll put on a TV show, I get my legs up like this, and I just put that loop over my knees. And then if I need to, I will begin to cut the ties. And those are going to be the little strands around your yarn that are holding it in a hank. Now Koigu only has one, and it's usually underneath their tag, and I hope you can see this, but for them it's this little thing right there, and you don't actually need scissors for theirs. You can pull them through, but once you get that going, you can then begin to hand wind. So one of the things I like to do is figure out if I have an outside. So this one seems like it's gonna pull better maybe. So what I start with is I just kind of do like a figure 8 around my forefinger and thumb. So I'm just sort of getting a fair amount around my forefinger and thumb. And you can do this part however you want. You can you could wrap it around something to make a little ball, but we just want to have a little amount so that we can fold it over and start to build around it. So I take it off my fingers and I've got just a little itty ball, and now I'm going to start to just wind it around. And there's really no trick to this. You just want to make sure it's even, do a few on each side and then turn it around. Just be aware that, you know, it's not a need for perfectionism. You just want to make sure that you are getting it even as even as you can as you go around, and really making sure that you aren't pulling on the yarn too hard. So if you're doing this and you're noticing that your ball is really tight and rock hard, you're probably wrapping the yarn too tight. And what's going to happen if you do that is that it can stretch out your yarn and actually cause it to lose some of its elasticity, especially if it's a wool. So if as you go along, just make sure that it's not like you're not like really stretching or tugging on the yarn as you do this. So I am going to continue to do this and fast forward, and I'll see you on the other side when I have a full ball. one of the things I will make note of is that depending on how big your hank is, sometimes your legs are going to be way out here. Sometimes they're going to be in if they're shorter. This is a pretty short hank. So you may want to unwrap like a couple rounds of it and then go to town. Otherwise, you may find that you're constantly having to pull the yarn out of the hank, kind of like this. That might get annoying if you have to do it every time. So sometimes I'll just do a couple of I'll unfurl a couple of go rounds so that I have enough to just go for a while on the winding. You don't want to do too much, otherwise you can get yourself in a knot over there, but this allows me to go with some speed for a little while. So that's another tip. Okay, so I'm almost done. Same thing, you just keep going until you're almost done. And if you notice that the strands keep falling off your legs, just move them down a little bit further. And dun, 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 dun. So I will hold up my lovely ball of hand wound yarn for you. Another thing I want to remind you is that it's always a good idea to save your tags, and if you don't like saving your tags, make sure you document what the yarn is, if it's possible, the dye lot on Ravelry. So you have a stash option on Ravelry, and you can definitely add your yarn to that. And one final note that I'll say is that I don't recommend winding your yarn unless you're ready to use a product or to use it in a project. So if you bought yarn and you're going to use it maybe a couple months down the road, just wait to wind it, because when it sits in this ball, if it's wound really tightly, it can actually, like I said before, make it lose some of its elasticity. So it's okay if it has to sit there for a month or two, or maybe even a little bit longer than that. But if you're not going to be using it for a long time, just leave it in the hank. So here is that lovely ball of koigu. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope that you found this helpful. Bye.